My name is Trey Thompson. I'm the Executive Director of the Oklahoma Historical Society, and I just want to welcome all of you here tonight. As you're probably aware, it's Native American Heritage Month, and we're glad to be participating in that as the Oklahoma Historical Society. And we're glad to be doing this great book signing for the book Ouachita Love Child about Jesse Ed Davis, legendary Oklahoma guitar player with Kiowa and Comanche heritage. And it's just a pleasure to welcome all of you for this event tonight. I want to thank a few people and entities. First of all, our staff here at the Oklahoma Historical Society has done a wonderful job putting this together, and I want to give props to Angela Spindle, our membership director. Angela's back there. She can wave. Also want to thank our Oklahoma Historical Society Board of Directors and our Friends of the Oklahoma History Center Board for all the support that they give us throughout the year. We have several sponsors of tonight's event that has helped us out along the way. First of all, Oklahoma Humanities, who does such a good job of promoting arts and culture in the state of Oklahoma. We appreciate them so much. The Oklahoma Museum of Popular Culture, OK Pop. Jake Crumwitty is our director. Way back there, Jake. And we have we brought Jesse Ed Davis's guitar and his amplifier, and it's back there in the case. And this is in our collection over at the OK Pop Museum, which is currently being constructed in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I want to thank the Shaban Tiger Band for being here tonight and helping provide some of the entertainment. And I want to thank our sponsor, Skydance Brewing Company. And if you are a lover of fine beers, you can go get them right back there. And I'm drinking the Pilsner tonight, and it is quite wonderful. So you should all check it out. Our development officer, Brittany Burling, wanted me to mention that this is her favorite beer as well. So wanted to mention that. I don't want to be up here for too long because we've got a great night planned for all of you, and I thank you all for coming out on a Tuesday night. And let's get the party started. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for coming tonight. My name is Dr. Matthew Pierce. I'm the state historian for the Oklahoma Historical Society, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce a friend and a scholar, probably my two favorite words in the English language, Dr. Douglas K. Miller. He's an associate professor of history at Oklahoma State University. He received his PhD from the University of Oklahoma in 2014. That just happened to be a very good year that year. Same year that I got my PhD from OU. He was previously a research fellow at the Clements Center for Southwest Studies at Southern Methodist University. His first book, Indians on the Move, Native American Mobility and Urbanization in the 20th Century, published by the University of North Carolina Press in 2019, examines the Federal Bureau of Indian Affairs voluntary relocation program, which between 1952 and 1972 sponsored the migration of 100,000 Native American people from rural to urban areas across the United States. Dr. Miller's research complicates our perspective of the urban relocation program by showing how Native peoples moved between rural and urban spaces and forged identities that, as he writes, are, quote, portable, pliable, perennial, and powerful. This theme in Dr. Miller's research continues in the book that he will discuss tonight, Ouachita Love Child, The Rise of Indigenous Rock Star Jesse Ed Davis, the long-awaited biography of the Red Dirt Boogie Brother himself. Alongside Muskogee musician and U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo, Miller is also the co-curator of Jesse Ed Davis' Natural Anthem, which opens this Friday, November 15th, at the Bob Dylan Center in Tulsa. And as if that was not enough, and I thought I was busy, but Miller is also the co-producer of a 2-LP archival set of unreleased music by Jesse Ed Davis titled Tomorrow May Not Be Your Day. And this set is due to be released on Record Store Day, November 29th. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Douglas Miller.
Yeah, I made this album too, coming out at the end of the month, and I'm going to give this copy to Chaban Tiger, but this is a pretty cool thing also. First of all, thank you, Matt, my old friend Matt Pierce, for that great introduction. Matt and I go way back to our doctoral program at the University of Oklahoma. I've looked up to him ever since, and not just because he's actually taller than me, which was a great asset on our graduate student basketball team. In fact, without Matt, we would have lost by 30 points instead of 10. So it's so great to see Matt here tonight and to have my old friend provide this introduction. Speaking of old friends, there are a lot of old friends here tonight. I've kind of seen some of you, but I haven't been able to make my way over. And there are new friends and old mentors and some of my advisees, my graduate advisees, current and former, and all kinds of good people here tonight. People from my favorite record stores in Oklahoma City, Ed from Monkey Feet and John from Trolley Stop, and just a really cool gathering of people here tonight to celebrate Jesse Ed Davis, who was from Oklahoma City, born in Norman, but raised here in Oklahoma, went to high school here, started his music career here and so forth. And it's really great we don't have to bring him home. I'm going to say this in the talk in a second. We don't have to bring him home. He's already home. He never quite left Oklahoma. But to gather tonight as a group of Jesse Ed Davis fans, and I know there are some old friends of Jesse's here tonight, and perhaps relatives and more. I couldn't be more grateful. And with that, I got to imagine how Jesse Ed Davis might be feeling right now to see this great turnout. Answering the phone in Los Angeles in his apartment in 1986, decades after leaving his Oklahoma City home, Jesse Ed Davis was anxious to share some news with the caller. "My ship has come in," he beamed. "I got 60 acres that's come down from the Kiowa," his mother's tribe. As luck would have it, I don't know if you know any legends of the old General George Armstrong Custer, but there was an old thing that went down called the Washita Massacre, he explained. Jesse's 60 acres included a ridge in the floodplain overlooking the site of the massacre. "I didn't know that until a few days ago," he added. But Jesse had always known stories about what happened to his Kiowa, Comanche, and Cheyenne people in the Washita country, including the murder of many women and children in 1868. He also knew about his Seminole and Muskogee ancestors who fought to defend their homelands in the southeastern United States before being marched at gunpoint to Indian territory during the 1830s. "Well, I'm fixin' now to move back to Oklahoma," Jesse announced. He was on a comeback trail, making new music with native artists, attending powwows, thinking about dancing again, and planning to enter the sweat lodge. At night, he dreamed about a life playing guitar in a little cafe on an Indian reservation, or moving into an old mansion on a hill back home in Oklahoma. Alas, as his friend Bob Dylan once sang, "You can always come back, but you can't come back all the way." Although maybe that isn't exactly true. Perhaps Jesse had his own thoughts on the matter. "Keep me coming back again," he sang. And Jesse is still making a comeback today, and we're part of it here tonight. When Jesse finally returned to Oklahoma in 1988, it would be in the wake of his painful passing. But his spirit and soul didn't need to return to Oklahoma with him, if only because they had never left. His story begins here, and when I accepted the invitation to join you tonight and share some of what I learned about him, it would only be right to discuss Jesse's life here before he headed for Hollywood. It was here where he became a Washita love child, not an Okie from Muskogee, he insisted in verse, but a red dirt boogie brother all the time. If Jesse once lamented how Oklahoma City remained, in his words, a six-gun city, a Wild West town in the context of modern times, as OKC's concerted effort to reach 600,000 people by 1960 was almost coming to fruition. Well, Jesse loved his home, and not so secretly. Or, as he liked to holler, standing on his porch looking across Venice Beach while firing his gun into the Pacific Ocean, "You can take the boy out of Oklahoma, but you can't take Oklahoma out of the boy." That's kind of Jesse Ed Davis in a nutshell. As frontman, sideman, guitarist, pianist, producer, band leader, and more, the multi-talented Jesse Ed Davis recorded or appeared with more than 100 major artists, including Bob Dylan, John Lennon, George Harrison, Ringo Starr, Taj Mahal, the Rolling Stones, the Allman Brothers Band, Jackson Browne, Eric Clapton, B.B. King, Emmylou Harris, Leon Russell, Harry Nilsson, Leonard Cohen, Rod Stewart, Joe Cocker, Cher, Gene Clark, Arlo Guthrie, and too many others to list here. In addition to making 3 solo albums during the early 1970s, he became one of the most sought-after guitarists in Hollywood, contributing to over 100 major releases, including 8 top 10 albums, 7 top 10 singles, and dozens more top 20 and top 40 records. "My discography would be as long as my arm, probably," Jesse said, and that was an understatement. It was specifically Jesse's scorching slide guitar on Taj Mahal's version of Statesboro Blues that inspired Duane Allman to adopt the technique with the Allman Brothers Band. Jesse first taught himself slide guitar sitting in his dorm room, skipping classes at OU, playing along to Elmore James records, restarting his turntable over and over again. And later, Duane Allman, Elliot Easton, Bonnie Raitt, Danny Korchmar, Peter Green, and other guitar luminaries would do the same things with the records Jesse made with Taj Mahal. Indian Ed will lay more guitar on you than any of them blues guitar people you can name, taunted the cosmic cowboy Graham Parsons. Indian Ed is the cream of the crop. He's better than Clapton and Hendrix put together. One of Jesse's greatest career peaks occurred in 1971 during George Harrison's concert for Bangladesh at Madison Square Garden. Jesse had initially been invited to fill the big shoes of an ailing Eric Clapton, who, with a little help from his friends, made the gig in the nick of time. With showtime rapidly approaching, Jesse emerged from a hotel room where he had received a crash course in the set list from bass guitarist Klaus Voormann. C to F, this goes here, that goes there, Voormann recalls. He was easygoing, fantastic. And having just learned the set, Jesse quickly became the rhythmic center, with George Harrison turning to Jesse to help him count in the numbers. It was the Jesse Ed Davis groove, concludes Jim Keltner, who pulled double drummer duty with Ringo that night. It was extreme bliss. All those wonderful musicians, Jesse later described it. I was standing right in front of Ringo Starr, and his bass drum was booming me in the back. Jesse himself counted the concert as his greatest artistic achievement. To play together for the purpose that we were doing, I thought was probably one of the highlights, the highest points of my career. Musical, emotional, spiritual, you name it. It was just a wonderful day. 16 years later, and 1 year prior to his passing, Jesse was still taking the stage with iconic artists and still at the center of the music they made, though this time they came to him. In February 1987, at Los Angeles' Stalwart Palomino Club, Bob Dylan and George Harrison showed up to help draw media attention to Jesse's Graffiti Man project with Dakota artist John Trudell, who had led the Alcatraz occupation back in 1970 when Jesse was launching his solo career. The now almost mythical Palomino gig captured Jesse in the middle of a comeback trail that ran through indigenous community, culture, and fellowship. I'm Jesse Ed Davis, and I'm real proud to be an Indian. And this is something I hope that doesn't go by you, he declared that night with his old friends gathered in support. To Jesse, the meaning of life was simple. Eat good food, play good music, and have fun. His song, Every Night is Saturday Night, wasn't just a party tune. It was a serious personal philosophy, though it sometimes became reckless. I made too much money too soon and too young, he once observed. Jesse was a quintessential Virgo, hardworking, but equally hard on those around him. He subjected himself and others to abrupt pivots between wanting to feel as intensely as possible and not wanting to feel at all. There's just a darkness in me, he confessed to friends when they tried to help him. Being an artist, he said, you have to feel deeply. You have to feel more deeply than the average person. You have to feel more deeply to even want to be an artist. And if that darkness explains his death, then lightness explains his life. In the end, his music should define him. Music and lyrics that illuminated a still largely unfamiliar set of indigenous experiences, ones that were a little more Saturday night in the city than Monday morning on the res, and filled with a little more joy than pain. Before Jesse came home, he went on an extraordinary journey. And there was great precedent within his Kiowa, Comanche, Cheyenne, Muskogee, and Seminole families to do great things. Many before him had also traveled around the country and around the world. His families featured numerous people who were leaders within their tribal communities and indigenous explorers, soldiers, ambassadors, and beyond. His Comanche family included numerous people who fought in World War II, including his father, uncle, and grandfather who served together in the Navy. His great-grandfather, his namesake, Jesse Ed Davis I, fought in World War I and died shortly thereafter. And Jesse's Kiowa cousin, Pascal Poulaw, is the most decorated Native soldier in American history. Jesse's families led in governance, religion, business, agriculture, and education too. His Seminole great-great-grandmother, Alice Brown Davis, was a successful businesswoman supervising a ranch, a general store, and a post office. And she later became the first female leader of the Seminole Nation. Meanwhile, Jesse's Kiowa grandfather, Jasper Sonke, served as a game warden, a U.S. Marshal, a school official, a church official, founder of the annual American Indian Exposition, and chairman of the Kiowa Nation during the Great Depression. Moreover, Jesse's maternal great-grandfather, George Poulaw, was an arrow maker, a sweat lodge doctor, and keeper of the Kiowa calendar, which documented Kiowa people's past events. In this respect, he was a historian. He practiced healing inside medicine teepees, where he invited the power of a guardian spirit. And he and other medicine people danced to drums and sang medicine songs, bringing music to the sick. Perhaps Jesse Ed Davis did the same, bringing people into a communal space, making rhythm, singing songs that celebrated life and the healing needed to sustain it. In his own way, Jesse offered people good medicine music. Examples of great leadership abounded in the 19th century too, such as Tapui, Jesse's Comanche great-great-grandfather, who was sub-chief of the Yamparika Band and led his people in defense of their ancestral homelands during the 1870s. Among Jesse's Cheyenne ancestors, based in Colony, Oklahoma, was his great-great-grandmother Yellowstone Woman, a holy woman, or Mahiyuna, who served the Sundance and operated a trading post, like Jesse's seminal great-grandmother Alice Davis. Jesse's great-great-aunt, Shell Woman, fought at the Sand Creek Massacre and killed 4 U.S. soldiers. These were tough women, and Jesse would have some tough women in his own life. Within the creative world, Jesse had ancestors who, like him, traveled for their art and their music, including the great Kiowa photographer Horace Poolaw and Jesse's seminal grandfather Bill Graham Davis, who played professional football and basketball before a career in Hollywood. Jesse's father, Jesse Edwin Davis II, was a prize-winning painter whose work showed around North America and in Europe, while he made graphics at Tinker Air Force Base by day. Jesse's mother, Vivian Sonke, daughter of Anna Poolaw, was a pianist who performed live concerts on the radio. Amazingly, she shared a piano teacher with a kid named Claude Bridges, who would later play with her son Jesse under the name Leon Russell. Vivian also traveled as a Kiowa dancer, performing everywhere from Los Angeles to New York City. And at the University of Oklahoma, she was a leader in the Sequoia Society. She danced during halftime at football games. She became the first Kiowa woman to earn a BA from OU, not in some characteristically gendered degree program for women, but in business administration. I could spend the rest of our time elaborating on Jesse Ed Davis's extraordinary ancestors. Many among them could sustain their own books. These are merely the greatest hits, if you will. Appreciate for a moment, then, just how large a shadow Jesse's family cast, in an empowering and inspiring way, but also in a way that manifested in immense pressure on Jesse to prove himself. Before Jesse entered stages and studios with rock royalty, he came from indigenous royalty. But first, he was a kid growing up in Oklahoma in the aftermath of the war. He was born in 1944 on the banks of the Washita River, he sang, in a Kiowa Comanche teepee, exhibiting his artistic license. He loved his mother more than anything in the world. Known affectionately as Aunt Bee or Mama Sita, Vivian taught Jesse to make people comfortable and to lift their spirits. She was the type who would go visit family or friends at someone else's home and then suddenly become the host, caring for those in her company. If the soul of Jesse's music came from his father, then the heart came from Vivian, who taught her only child, Eddie Davis, to play the piano. Jesse was certainly inspired, sometimes intimidated by his father, too. Father and son were both powwow dancers. They both played offensive tackle on their respective football teams, and both drew and painted and played guitar, though Eddie Davis would best his father's talent in that latter category, if not others. Jesse Edwin Davis III so resembled a miniature Jesse Edwin Davis II that the two actually won an annual father-son look-alike contest in 1948. Around the time Eddie, as they called him when he was a boy, was in 6th grade, his father began taking guitar lessons, just another in a rotating assortment of instruments he taught himself to play. Eddie watched his father's fingers pick his Martin 0028 acoustic guitar. Soon Eddie began sneaking the guitar from the closet before his father returned home from work. For some reason, I didn't want him to know I was playing, he later remembered. He wanted me to be a piano player. but Eddie hated his piano teacher, claiming she hailed from, quote, the battle axe school. He would rather just learn from his mother. Meanwhile, Eddie could not contain his fascination with the guitar. His parents finally answered his prayer and put one in his hands. The details of this story changed each time the adult Jesse Ed Davis shared it. It is true, as he once told a live audience in New York, that he began in front of a mirror, not with a guitar, but a ukulele strung around his neck with a rope, pretending to be Elvis Presley, Jimmy Reed, and Chuck Berry. The latter's Roll Over Beethoven among the first songs Jesse learned how to play. In another version, it was an electric silver tone from the Sears catalog in 7th grade. In yet another iteration, it was a 1095 Stella model guitar. The exact instrument notwithstanding, the story always involved Eddie and a mirror. He studied his reflection while absorbing the sounds coming over the radio waves or pulsating from his father's formidable collection of Dixieland jazz and deep blues records. Eddie began venturing to Jenkins Music here in Oklahoma City to take a few lessons with a veteran Oklahoma City jazz and country picker named Julian Adkins, who went by Jess. Like Eddie's father, this other Jess was a World War II veteran. And home from the war, he landed a gig as Cowboy Jess on local radio and television shows, including the Chuckwagon Gang. And he occasionally backed singing cowboy stars such as Gene Autry and Jimmy Wakely. Interesting to note that Jesse Ed Davis has some kind of connection to Gene Autry. When Eddie began training with him, Jess's main gig was a session guitarist for WKY-TV and radio. And as a combination solo artist, session guitarist, and sideman to the stars, Jess Adkins must have taught Jesse Ed Davis just as much about how to make a living as a musician as he did about playing guitar. Jess Adkins' lessons in country and jazz licks became a well from which Jesse would draw for the rest of his life. Eddie picked up chords, scales, and techniques from his teacher, but his particular style and sound emerged from the countless hours he committed to playing guitar. And when Jesse's grandfather Jasper died in 1959, Eddie embraced guitar as a means to pass the time as his family ceased social activities for 1 year in the spirit of mourning. Guitar, as Jesse said, struck a hidden chord deep within my soul. He described his conversion upon his grandfather's passing. By age 17, guitar was, Jesse said, all I lived for. One of Eddie's first public appearances occurred at a Northeast high school variety show with his buddies Jim Burke and Mike Brewer. The latter went on to one-toke over-the-line fame with his folk duo Brewer and Shipley. Well, they thought I was a ham, Jesse later recalled about his classmates' reception. The trio performed a cover of the Five Satins in the Still of the Night, with Brewer crooning vocals that made girls in the audience cry. And they paired it with a bawdy rendition of the perennial sea shanty, What Do You Do with a Drunken Sailor?, which, coupled with Eddie's demand that they play this gig under the name the Sipes Three, made the trio worry they would receive a visit from the principal after the show. Sipes was the name of the most notorious brothel in Oklahoma City. It's an early example of Eddie's affinity for the dirty blues, characterized by ribald humor and innuendo that would later feature in some of his work as a professional artist. Though Eddie was quickly developing a reputation from OKC to Norman as a talented teenage guitar player, he remained vulnerable to racism and prejudice. This was always apparent when he was cruising the Strip, that great post-war American teenager pastime. Eddie's first set of wheels, his friend Mike Smith remembers, was a two-door white 55 Chevy hot rod, column coupe, center post, pinstripes, and flipper hubcaps. The car's rumbling exhaust attracted a police officer in exclusive Nickel Hills one afternoon when Eddie was out cruising with his bandmate Chris Fredrickson. After some back and forth, the cop pulled Eddie out of the car. "You trying to get in trouble, son?" Eddie snapped back. "You trying to write a book, cop?" The officer pointed to his handcuffs. Eddie backed down. "But that was him," says Fredrickson. "He had a sharp tongue and a chip on his shoulder." Eddie's acerbic wit couldn't rescue him from every situation. After a group of kids at the movie theater bullied him for being Native American, he began bringing his older Kiowa cousin, Ray Doyle, with him for protection. On other occasions, Jesse appealed not to humor or a bigger, older cousin, but to a machete. He used to scare away teens from rival high schools who were looking for a fight on the Classen Boulevard hot rod circuit. Eddie would give them an intimidating stare. He'd slowly draw his machete from under his driver's seat where he kept it hidden. The threats were real for him. Sometimes in a state of inconsolable panic, afraid of racist bullies stalking him, he refused to leave his house. In that context, we might understand why Jesse was driven to protect himself, to protect his indigenous identity, and reinvent himself as an authentic blues man. One afternoon in 1959, an aspiring teenage musician named John Selk was playing guitar in Oklahoma City's Larson Music. This was not an uncommon occurrence. Any number of musicians, young and old, could be found there picking guitars. It was a hub for musicians hoping to bump into others looking to form a band. Selk had already had a group called the Continentals, playing bass with his drummer pal John Ware. They were looking to reconfigure their lineup after parting ways with their unreliable singer. Selk noticed an American Indian kid watching him play. This went on for a while before the silence broke. "Hey, you're pretty good. Do you mind if I play with you?" "No," Selk consented. The kid grabbed a guitar off the wall and immediately made Selk's jaw drop. After exchanging phone numbers, Selk hurried home to call John Ware. "Man, I met this Indian kid today that plays his ass off. His name is Eddie Davis." "Call him," Ware instructed. Eddie Davis answered. He was interested. With Eddie Davis in the fold, the Continentals developed a reputation as one of the best young bands in Oklahoma. The core group gradually picked up rotating members who would fill in for someone else who couldn't make the gig. Or they would just randomly expand a lineup with keyboards and horns. When joined by a horn section, the Continentals could stretch to 7 or 8 band members. The fluid system reflected the big band music Jesse Davis loved. The Continentals were good enough to become a popular group without relying on popular covers. Well, they did play popular songs such as Chubby Checker's The Twist, Hank Ballard and the Midnighters' Let's Go, Let's Go, Let's Go, and the Isley Brothers' Shout. But the crowd had to wait for them between original arrangements of Ray Charles, Freddie King, and Jimmy Reed blues numbers, including Baby, What You Want Me to Do, that were undanceable or unfamiliar or both to the audiences. At the University of Oklahoma, various fraternities hired the Continentals to play college parties at river bottom shows. The latter were quite literally giant parties in dry riverbeds on the outskirts of Norman. Organizers would lay out a giant tarp for the band to stage their gear on and bring generators to power the equipment. The set list veered into vulgarity at these gigs. University students, even socially conservative Oklahomans, loved the overt sexual innuendo of songs like Baby, Let Me Bang Your Box, and other numbers from Doug Clark and the Hot Nuts novelty albums, Homecoming, On Campus, Rush Week, released appropriately by the Gross Records label. The group's versatility earned them different types of gigs. They might pack Oklahoma City's Peppermint Lounge on 10th Street with 300 fans, or they would headline Purple Passion parties at OU's Beta House, decorate it floor to ceiling in purple for the event. On one occasion, Eddie was a bit too passionate about the purple stuff, a guaranteed hangover blend of grape juice and grain alcohol. Well, he passed out under the dining table and could not be resuscitated, the drummer John Ware recalls. Before long, the Continentals were hooking a U-Haul to a sedan and hitting the road for shows from Tulsa all the way to Dallas and Odessa, Texas. Nothing, however, matched the excitement of their first weekend stand in 1963 at Ronnie Hawkins' legendary Rockwood Supper Club out on Highway 71 in Fayetteville, Arkansas. All the top national and regional groups, including the Hawks and Conway Twitty, played there. This was real validation of the Continentals' talent, and to the group, it might as well have been Carnegie Hall. And then, one day, in August 1963, some of Eddie's friends went to see the king of the jukebox, rockabilly star and future country music hitmaker Conway Twitty, at the Spring Lake Amusement Park, just across the field from the house where Jesse grew up. Filing through a couple thousand people, Eddie's friends looked up at the stage and saw 19-year-old Eddie Davis strapped into a Gibson ES 345, playing with Conway Twitty. They were shocked, but not surprised. Playing with Conway Twitty was a remarkable achievement for an 18-year-old or 19-year-old Eddie Davis. Twitty had a #1 hit in It's Only Make Believe and a devoted audience. Moreover, playing with a star came with special perks, including fancy tailored suits, which Eddie wore with pride. The gig came with keys to fancy cars, too. One winter, Twitty loaned Eddie his brand new Cadillac Fleetwood, and Eddie drove his fiancée Mary Carroll around the city to see Christmas displays and show off the car. The couple glowed like the warm lights all around them. Ed, as he now increasingly preferred, embraced the opportunity to expand his guitar skills with Twitty, teaching him country guitar licks and turning him on to Chet Atkins. Before joining Twitty, Eddie said with some exaggeration, "I'd never been out of Oklahoma City in my life." Well, that changed quickly. With Twitty, he played from everywhere from the Navajo Civic Center in Window Rock, Arizona, to small Midwestern towns like Clear Lake, Iowa, and Moline, Illinois. With Twitty, Ed appeared on television, traveled around playing music for enthusiastic audiences, and shared concert bills with the Hawks. Even when it wasn't glamorous, some nights the group slept 6 to a hotel room in remote places. Ed thought he was on top of the world. Ed experienced not only the end of Twitty's rockabilly period, but also ruptures in music culture and American culture more broadly. You could almost see the kids changing from day to day, Twitty noticed. And while Twitty loved the music these shifting currents inspired, he wasn't as radical as the young people who comprised his audiences. They weren't afraid to do almost anything right out in the open. Things we never dreamed about doing in our day, Twitty said. Twitty moved in a different direction, joining the ranks of country music, which demonstrated its own dramatic transformations during the era, but nevertheless felt more like home to an artist trying to find comfortable footing. In June 1965, Ed went with Twitty to Summers Point, New Jersey, across the Great Egg Harbor Bay from Ocean City to play Tony Mart's Beach Club. The Hawks were on the bill too. This gave Ed a chance to get to know them a little better. And if one version of events is correct, then Bob Dylan dropped by that weekend to scout the Hawks before inviting them to become his new band. Tony Mart's featured go-go dancers, 7 drink bars, 20 cash registers, 40 bartenders and bouncers. Oh, we had a ball there, Ed remembered. Following an exuberant set by the Hawks, Twitty and company opened with a traditional version of the Irish standard Danny Boy before launching into their rock and roll numbers in a string of Elvis Presley tunes. And though the crowd was smaller than last time Twitty came through, those in attendance danced with their usual enthusiasm. Meanwhile, a rival performer who appeared across from Tony Mart's at the Bayshores Club reflected the musical changing of the guard underway everywhere. New bands were beginning to perform in jeans and t-shirts, letting their hair grow and challenging popular conventions. This included the headliner Tito Mambo, aka Tony Fresca, who arrived at gigs inside a coffin, transported by a hearse. Mambo's pallbearer bandmates, the Messiahs of Soul, paraded the coffin through a parting sea of fervent fans to the stage where Mambo rose like Lazarus during the opening number and stepped out looking like Jesus, his holy self. Long hair, beard, and a robe, shepherding his flock of hippie disciples with a Stratocaster. Over at Tony Mart's, across the street, the suit-clad Conway Twitty and his Oklahoma Review, the last of the gentlemen, were tossing out Elvis tunes to their loyal but diminishing crowd, and Jesse Ed Davis was there as both a witness and a participant. When not on the road with Twitty, Ed Davis continued leading the Continentals, applying his new professional lessons to his old group. They were now calling themselves Joe Banana and the Bunch, named after a Sicilian crime boss from Brooklyn who was making national news after disappearing during a mafia war. This was Ed Davis's idea. Ed recruited his father to help build a trailer with shelving and semi-permanent racks the group could use to haul their speaker columns and instruments on the road. His father added his artist touch, painting Joe Banana and the Bunch graphics on the side of the trailer. Underneath it said, their sound has great appeal. In 1965, Ed took Joe Banana and the Bunch into Gene Sullivan's small 3-track studio to cut a single. Before getting started, the Bunch needed to change its name again. This was serious business, and their name was a joke. Now going by the New Breed, they cut 2 songs composed by J. Edwin Davis. Recorded live with no overdubs, the New Breed's A-side was Just Another Bird Dog, a 4/4 foot stomper with soulful horns, a lead vocal delivered with enough zeal to distort the microphone, and a slinky Ed Davis guitar solo. The lyrics are typical teenage angst about a guy trying to rescue his girl from the clutches of a bad boy. That other guy is not true, Ed's lyrics warn. He's trying to push all of his lies into your life. He thinks he can win. And then the pre-chorus rises with desperation. Won't you listen to me? Oh, can't you see? He's trying to put the hurt on you. And then a dramatic pause before the chorus. He's just another bird dog. By 1966, with his music going somewhere, Bird Dog having been a hit on the OU campus, Ed began wondering why he should bother finishing his English degree. He couldn't focus. He couldn't stop the music in his head. His every thought was set to a soundtrack. And then at night, he dreamed about music too. I'd just sit in English and just look out the window and just be thinking guitar riffs in my head all day, he recalled. Not just guitar, sometimes I'd get whole symphonies going in my head. No longer able to resist, Jesse later recalled, right in the middle of class one day, I walked out. I went down to the administration building and dropped out of school, packed up all my stuff from the dorm and drove home. I hung around for a couple of days, and in a week, I was in Los Angeles. I didn't know anybody, not one soul. I had to go to California to meet guys from Oklahoma who grew up 90 miles away from me, he explained. Well, on their way out of Oklahoma City in 1966, Ed Davis and his pal Joe Royer pointed down Route 66 in Royer's 66 Corvette. They ran into their guitar player friend, Joe Bob Nelson. Hey, you want to come with us to Los Angeles? Ed asked. Oh, what are you going to go do out there? Nelson replied. Ed thought for a second, and he responded, I need to go make my mark. Thanks for coming out tonight and listening to this talk. Thanks for picking up the book. I'll be happy to sign copies. I can't wait to hear the Jabon Tiger Band play some Jesse Ed Davis music, and I hope to meet many of you. Thank you so much, and thanks to Jesse Ed Davis.
Oh, I got too close. We have a little bit of time for some questions, if anybody has any questions from the audience. No one was prepared, so we don't have any. Do we have any plants in the audience that can get us started?
There's a question, yeah, sure. My earliest memory in life, this is true. My earliest memory in life, 3 years old, like that's as far back as I can go. And it just sort of diminishes. Our son, my and X's son, Kid, is 6 right now, and we're like reminding him stuff from last year. You don't remember this book we read? Or this? My earliest memory in life, my family, my mom and dad and I, were moving back home to Moline, Illinois from Tacoma, Washington, where my father was stationed at Fort Lewis. And in the car on the way back, I must not have been in a car seat, because I remember sitting in the front seat and just going through the glove box and rifling through cassettes. And I remember listening to cassette tapes the whole way back. And I remember it was Bob Seger and Queen and Jackson Browne's solo album, first solo album with Dr. My Eyes on it. So in one respect, I've been listening to Jesse Ed Davis since my earliest memories. Then growing up on FM radio and classic rock, becoming a working musician myself, becoming a record collector, I just started to see his name appearing over and over again. And one night, 6, 7 years ago, I was listening to a Gene Clark album, Gene Clark from the Byrds, that Jesse Ed Davis produced and played guitar on. And I had it on the turntable, and I just sat up for a second and thought, how come we don't know more about Jesse Ed Davis? I keep seeing his name. He seems really interesting, and I know he's a native guy from Oklahoma, and I'm in Oklahoma. Maybe I should try to figure out what this story is. And I realized relatively quickly there just isn't much out there. And I then realized that if I wanted to read a book about him, I'd have to write one. So I did. I started on about 5 years ago, and here we are tonight. That's kind of the short answer. Yeah.
Of all the different groups and iterations of bands that you played with, do you have one particular group that you really relished more than others?
He was so proud of the work he did just before the end of his life with the Graffiti Band, working with another native artist, John Trudell, a Dakota poet and artist. The amazing thing is, Jesse didn't know John Trudell in the early 70s when Trudell was at Alcatraz, but Jesse recorded a song called Alcatraz about the occupation on his second solo album. Who knew these guys were going to hook up 15 years later? He was so proud of his work with Taj Mahal. He was so proud of his work and his brotherly bond with John Lennon. In the book, I go into great depth about John Lennon and Jesse Ed Davis's connection, and it runs far deeper than I anticipated when I started on the project. Gene Clark, too. He loved Gene Clark, but if pressed for just one, he really loved his work with the Graffiti Band, with John Trudell, working with a native artist. And with Trudell, Jesse he said, they were making a new kind of music that I've never really heard before or since in all my music listening. So yeah, in that respect, although he passed at an untimely age, maybe in his impression, he kind of went out on top.
I was just reminded that any questions asked that aren't on the mic won't make it to the recording. So if you got a question, want to raise your hand, Matt and I will try and grab you on the mic. That wasn't an enticing offer. If you have a question now, you have to be mic'd in order to ask it.
I'm open to anything. Don't hesitate if you got a good one. Of course, I just focused on a couple chapters in the book for tonight's purposes, being in Oklahoma City. But I'm happy to discuss anything about his life and career.
Oh, we've got one.
I'd like to know about your writing process. how much time do you spend on research versus how much time do you spend on writing? And how difficult was it to go and find all of this information?
My lovely wife here tonight would tell you that it's true. I worked on this book every single day for the last 5 years, including Sundays and holidays. I never took a day off from this book, even if it was just an hour. It's making me emotional because somewhere in that I kept up duties as a father and as a husband every day researching and writing it. And the project really took off during the beginning of the pandemic, which was serendipitous for a couple of reasons, because it brought a lot of new music into our home when we were sort of stuck there together. And all this Jesse Davis music, it became the soundtrack of that time as we sort of held together as a family. Moreover, people who knew Jesse Davis were at home too, just like us, and they were available, and I get on the phone with me and talk for an hour. So in that respect, notwithstanding the terrible effects of the pandemic, it was a nice time to work on a book. I researched every day too. I mean, I'm still researching. I've had a couple people call me in the last week, and I knew Jesse, can we talk? The book's done, but I'm still gonna interview them and record them and just keep building this archive. To make this book, I had to make an archive first. So the research and the writing were concurrent. There is no Jesse Davis archive. There's no library that you can go to and let me see the Jesse Davis papers, please. That doesn't exist. But then there is an archive among the people who are still alive today and carry his story and shared that with me. And his music is an archive. The albums are an archive. The liner notes actually tell us a lot. The songs tell us a lot and so forth. So to answer your question, the writing and research every day. Sometimes I would get a place down in Kiowa country and go down there for a week or so and really work on the writing, because I want it to be in Kiowa people's place and Comanche people's place and try to get close to the center of where Jesse's families were coming from. But that's some impression of what it was like. Thank you. Yeah, Dr. Griswold.
Sorry, I couldn't tell where you were in the line of demarcation there.
Thanks for the talk, Doug. It was wonderful. I knew it would be. Could you talk a little bit about his experience at OU? How did it change him? Did he do any work in Native American history, for example?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm going to blank right now because he struggled at OU a little bit. He didn't attend class very often because he was really interested in playing music, and it was working, to his credit, understandably. He was getting somewhere with his music. He was kind of a solid C, D, and F student for most semesters. The one B he ever earned his entire career at OU was in domestic arts. It's like, Jesse. He was enthusiastic about his education. He loved to learn. He was a voracious reader. He was an incredibly intelligent person. So much so that we know those really intelligent students who don't go to class because they just don't quite fit in, right? But he spent most of his time playing guitar around campus. He had a tough time, too, trying to get into a fraternity and being rejected on grounds of being Native American. And that really hurt him, from what I understand, and hurt some of his enthusiasm for the experience. He had, why is his name escaping me? He's a foundational scholar in Native American history. He had a history teacher, I'll keep trying to think of the name, it's in the book, who turned him on to Native American history as an academic discipline. And his history professor had published just recently one of the most sort of revered books about Cheyenne people's history that also included a lot of Comanche and Kiowa history too. And Jesse read that book and loved that book and learned a lot, beyond what he had already learned from his own family. So there was one history professor in particular that he took a real liking to and was a great influence on him. And he took 2 classes with him, as a mark of that professor's influence, where he comes back. Jesse goes back for more from this particular professor. I'm so upset that I'm not remembering his name.
that kind of takes us to the end of our time for questions and answers, and we will have the book signing just around the corner there. And I guess we'll finish that, let him get over there and move on.
Thank you. Thank you.